Right. Okay. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our third and final hustings, which has been organised by Local Motion, a social justice group, and Enfield Climate Action Forum, and with the support of our media partner, the Enfield Despatch. I'd like to first of all thank everyone for taking the time to join the event, and also our candidates who are going to be sharing with us their policies for future, assuming they get into government. Also, I'd like to thank all the people behind the scenes who've worked tirelessly to make sure that this hustings happens. Francis, Paul, Panos, Patrick, and Dan from the live streaming and Zoom team, thank you all. I would also like to thank Local Motion for giving the community a voice and a platform in this way. This is a moment in time when we can change the course of history and improve things, not just for now, but for future generations through the decisions we make today. My name is Nena, and I'm Annie Anwu, and I'm the CEO of Citizens Advice in Enfield. I'll be your chair today for this evening, and my job is simple: to ask your questions and ensure that everyone responds and keeps to time. This hustings is for Enfield North, and it is being live streamed on Facebook and YouTube. As I said, we've done 2 already, and this is the final one. We have a great lineup of candidates on the panel tonight, and I have no doubt that it will be an informative session for everyone in attendance. So, in no particular order, the candidates are Chris Day for the Conservative Party. Do you want to give us a wave? Isabel Whitaker from the Green Party. You give us a wave. Farrell Clark, Labour Party. Yay. Guy Russo, Liberal Democrats. And Stephen Bird from the Reform Party.
Hello.
And Erton Papasley. I hope I said that right. Please forgive me. He's an independent. Okay. So unfortunately, Aishat Annie Fawoshe, and please forgive me for the name, from the Workers' Party of Britain is not able to attend. She did want to attend, but due to her work commitment, she's unable to. We've received many questions in response to this hustings, and we can only choose a handful, unfortunately, due to time. But we do want to answer questions from the people that have joined live. So please put your questions in our Q&A box at the bottom. Type your questions in the chat, and we will pick them up through the course of the session. So a few house rules before we start. So we're concentrating on 3 key areas of concern: the housing crisis, the cost of living crisis, and the climate change emergency. We want to give each section equal time and address as many questions as possible. The session will be split into 3 sections, and there'll be an introduction at the start of each section to give some context to the issues that the residents have. And if there's time at the end, we'll have other questions. So each candidate will have 1 minute only to I shall interrupt you if you're going over. So please try and keep to time. Also, please be positive in your responses. We want to hear what you will do for your constituency, and not what another party will not do or has not done. And at the end of the whole session, you'll have 30 minutes to be able to sum up why people should vote for you. So I hope that's all clear. Without further ado, we'll start with the housing section. So can I ask Janet from the Citizens Advice to introduce the housing topic, please?
Hi everyone, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Okay, and I think Panos, were you going to share
Seems to have hung.
Oh, he's sharing the screen now.
I think you've lost me.
Janet frozen.
Hello?
Yep, we can hear you, Janet. Do you want to go?
We can hear me, lovely. Okay, thank you, Nina, and hi, everyone. Okay, so it's widely accepted that Enfield and indeed London is experiencing an unprecedented housing crisis. This is a national crisis that needs a national policy solution. Enfield has the third highest number of families in temporary accommodation or at risk of homelessness in London, according to Trust for London research data. Historically, as citizens of Ice Enfield, our top two issues have been welfare benefits and debt. Housing has hovered between third and fourth position. We help over 6,400 clients every year in Enfield. In the last 2 years, housing and homelessness has become our second biggest issue, accounting for over 20% of all client cases. Rising private rents, the local housing allowance freeze, and the rise in Section 21 no-fault evictions have led to a steep rise in private renters needing help with homelessness since the pandemic. Private rents are unaffordable. Enfield has seen a 246% increase in rents over the past 7 years.
I don't know what happened there. It just dropped out.
And there are inequalities in the housing crisis affected single parents, those for whom English is not their first language, low income and people with disabilities. This is predominantly in the east of the borough, further widening the east-west divide. Enfield Council Housing spends nearly 7 million a year supporting people who are homeless and in temporary or emergency accommodation, which is putting them on the brink of bankruptcy. The council will need to save approximately 35 million in 2025 to avoid bankruptcy. There are no council properties or affordable homes for those who need it most, and the private rented sector housing stock has dwindled. We are facing a significant housing crisis that requires urgently addressing. We need urgent and effective policy solutions to the crisis. Here is a clip from a recent housing forum, local motion and citizens' advice held to hear the view of residents who are at the sharp end of the housing crisis. Thanks, Panos.
So whose responsibility do you think it should be to find that home or house for you?
Initially, it's down to us,
Okay.
but with support. I mean, I'm willing to even go far and go private renting myself, but I can't afford to pay for both
It's getting the deposits and the like the deposit and the month's rent and things like that.
Yeah,
People
that's
just aren't
hard
in the
to do.
financial situation to be able to do that.
We've got this group here saying that the individuals should be responsible for finding a home if it was very easy to do so. That's why we at the moment rely to the local authority, because it is impossible to rent a property at the moment unless you have a guarantor, unless you have certain income, and unless if you can't provide both, you have to have good money aside to be able to give at least 2 months rent and 2 months deposit.
That's right.
Which, if you have those money, then you're not entitled to benefits.
And a lot of
So
people don't take
it's a
DSS.
it's a very difficult.
Yeah, a lot of people don't take DSS, private rentals.
Thank you, Panos, and thank you, Janet. So you've heard the problems, you've heard the challenges that residents are facing. So here's the question that we have for you. We know there is a housing crisis. Enfield has traditionally had a large private rented sector to fill the gap due to limited social housing. However, there are more Section 21 evictions, more people applying as homeless, and the rent in London and the South East is unaffordable. The local placement policy has identified that offers of accommodation to homeless applicants in the north of England away from family, friends, carers and their support networks. So this is a question from Mary. And so the question is, how do you think this issue can be resolved? And what steps would you take to start implementing the changes? If I can ask Isabel, please, from the Green Party.
Thank you. So we need to be clear about what's causing this. So this comes down to seeing or using the housing that we have as investments, as capital, and that's what successive governments have done for a long time. We all know that phrase, the property market, but actually our homes are our accommodation long before they are assets. And what we see is so many empty properties which are being treated as an investment. So they're being kept empty deliberately, you know, in the hope that they will go up. And the way the economy is run, they always do go up. And we also have commercial properties which could be repurposed as accommodation, which are not being used effectively. And we could also build genuinely affordable homes in sensible places. And what we're seeing in Enfield is building on the green belt, which is something that the Green Party would absolutely stand against, and something that I would fight against very strongly if you were to vote for me. If the focus was on getting people safely housed instead of making sort of a fast buck for commercial landlords and developers, then it could actually be done very easily.
Okay,
and
I'm going to have to stop you there, because if you just want to make how easily, and then that's it, because you've gone a little bit over.
Yeah, sure. So, you know, it comes down to having a responsible government which cares for people before it cares for making money for itself and its friends. And the way to do that is traditional ways, to have rent controls so that you don't have these skyrocketing unaffordable rents which are just going into landlords' pockets.
Okay,
you have powers for local authorities to buy
you.
empty homes.
I've got to stop you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, can I ask Chris, please, from the Conservatives?
Thank you very much, and thank you also for the question. So look, understand the national picture, but also here in Enfield we've got specific issues which are not helped, and the two specific things that I would be pushing to do if I'm the Member of Parliament. Firstly, I'd be putting pressure on the council to build out Meridian Water. There's space there on a brownfield site for 10,000 homes, and they've done absolutely nothing on that. We've got 20 habitable homes in 14 years. That's a shambolic record. And actually, if the council had maintained its own housing stock better, and we've seen the disasters on the Shires estate locally.
Can I just ask you to focus on what the Conservatives will do, please? Yeah,
we would build more homes on brownfield sites here in Enfield for sure, and we could give Enfield all the housing it needs without building on the green belt. I'm absolutely confident of that. The other thing that we would do is scrap. I would ask the council to scrap their landlord's charter. Landlords in Enfield are selling their homes rather than renting them out, where we've had landlords, because the council are making it more difficult for people to. So I would scrap that straight away if I was in charge. Okay,
thank you very much. Thank you. And can I ask Erton, please, to go next? What would you do?
So, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Yep. Loud and clear.
So, regarding council houses, one of the reasons why we have a crisis there is simply because councils all over the UK are being underfunded by the government. So we need to actually generate new funds, and I'm going to do that by calling for a wealth tax so that the government has more money to invest in councils, so the councils can do a better job. But also, we need the people to put pressure on the council from below. And I, as an MP, will be putting pressure on the council from above to really root out a lot of incompetencies and what I see as corruption within the council, to actually start getting more council properties available for people. And also, we need to really regulate and revise rules on the private housing market as well. And I believe we need to start putting pressure on private estate agents who have been basically using their system to increase prices, to make things more competitive. And this is outpricing local communities and actually leading to demographic changes in places like Enfield. So we need to really regulate more regulation on private estate agents as well.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And Farrell, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Nana. And first of all, can I just say a massive thank you for organising this husting. Simply, the biggest problem we have for the housing crisis we have is that we have not built the houses we need. That is social housing. We've not built enough of it. That is affordable housing, housing that people, key workers, can actually afford. And the second thing is that we have this legislation called Section 21 that actually is no fault eviction that is causing homelessness in Enfield. If you were to speak to the local authority, they will tell you that 40% of the homelessness cases that approach the council currently are as a result of no fault evictions.
Okay,
So
Farrell,
what
sorry,
would
can I
Labour
ask-
do?
Yes.
What
thank
would
you.
Labour do? Labour will get Britain building again. We will build 1.5 million new homes over the next Parliament. That would be social, that would be affordable, all 10 years of housing. We will immediately update the national policy planning framework, including restoring mandatory housing targets, because at the moment those targets will have been abolished. Labour will also support local authorities by funding additional planning officers through increasing the rate of stamp duty surcharges paid by non-UK residents.
Thank
The problem
you.
at the moment
Thank
is
you.
we
Sorry, I've
can't
got
get
to
the
stop
houses.
you. I've got to stop.
Thank you,
We'll come
Nana.
back to that. Thank you. Okay, can I have Guy, please? Thank you.
Hi, hello. Let me just be very quick and clear. A lot of people talk about how we might solve the housing crisis. Here is a very straightforward Liberal Democrat plan for you. Firstly, we're going to build 150,000 new social homes per year across the country, and many of those will need to be in places with the greatest demand. Enfield is indeed one of those. But how do you actually go about building the right houses in the right place? It's a watchword that all political parties talk about. Well, here's a plan that we can actually do. Set up a as MP, I would be pushing for the council to do this, to set up a council-owned and run housing development company so that the needs of residents are the primary factor in deciding where housing gets built, what kind of amenities are around housing, so that we get the right housing in the right places. That's the proper local democratic way of doing it. Just one other quick thing on renters, and as a young person myself, I know how awful that market is at the moment and how terrifying it can be. We have to firstly scrap Section 21 eviction notices. The Liberal Democrats are committed to opposing that and getting rid of that. And also we've been campaigning for a long time on getting rid of the Vagrancy Act. So what's particularly disgusting, I think, is that people are being put in these awful situations, some of the most awful situations a person could be in, to be left homeless, and then they're being criminalised for being.
I'm going to have to stop you there. Sorry, but you've made your point loud and clear. Thank you very much. And last but not least, Stephen, please. Thank you.
Hello. So let me just start my timer. So what we do, everyone needs housing. The problem is we've got sort of number of houses and number of people, and the number of people has been increasing far quicker than the number of houses. And it's just been impossible to build the number of houses to keep up with demand. So, I mean, one of the things we would do is use the brownfield sites, fast track the planning and tax incentives for using brownfield sites. Another thing for us we would do is no building on the green belt. That to us should be sacrosanct. There's lots of other places we can build. We can sort of build on brownfield sites and protect the green belt. Another thing we would do is prioritise sort of local people, and people have paid into the system locally. It may not go down well with some people, but you just can't have more and more people coming into Enfield and expect them to be housed with less and less houses. We would have housing built, but social housing and commercial housing built together. So we wouldn't just have lots of social housing, we would do the two combined.
Okay, thank you.
And also I think another thing would be to scrap the Renters Reform Bill. We think it wasn't going to work.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to stop you there. Thank you very much. That's good. So I have a question in the chat, which I'm just going to pick up, and it says, do any of the candidates support building on the Greenbelt land in Enfield? Since everybody sort of said building more houses, anybody? So let me throw that one to Guy. I'll ask you first. Thank you.
Absolutely not. I've been fighting for Greenbelt in my local area for basically my entire time in politics, especially White Webs and the White Webs development that's been proposed at the moment. But I think we must protect the green belt around Cruise Hill and everywhere in Enfield. So we must protect the green belt. I do not agree with building on the green belt in Enfield.
Okay, thank you. And Chris, please.
Thank you. No, yeah, absolutely not. But in fact, I voted against it twice in the council chamber. But our council, our dear council here, do want to build on the green belt. They want to de-designate it. This is one of the huge issues facing Enfield, and I'm absolutely categorically and wholeheartedly opposed to it.
Okay, thank you. And Ayrton, please. You're on mute.
Yep, I'm completely against building on the green belt. In fact, I want to increase the number of green spaces in Enfield, if that's possible. So, no building on the green belt for me.
Okay, thank you. And Stephen?
No, categorically no. We feel there's enough brownfield sites available in Enfield and effectively around London, so that they could be used instead. We don't need to do it, so it would be a categorical no from us.
Okay, thank you. And Farrell?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah,
oh, right, sorry.
Yeah.
I will say brownfield first. Within the green belt, any brownfield must be prioritised over for development, and then grey belt, I will say second. There are poor quality green belt areas that could be clearly prioritised over nature-rich, environmentally valuable areas. So I would say that's the order. We also, Labour Party will also strengthen the release of green belt. At the moment, it's done in a haphazard way. We will have stricter regulation around how green belt is released for development, like what you see in Broxbourne wouldn't happen under Labour government.
Okay, that's good. Thank you. And finally, Isabel?
Yeah, I mean, how we can describe the places that the council are planning to build in Enfield as poor quality and not nature rich, it's just outrageous. Green space is not empty space. It's a very toxic view to look at green space and see that as empty space and somewhere that you can develop. Green belt has to be preserved at all costs. We don't have enough green space in London. Enfield's a very green borough, but it's very divided in terms of the green space that we have. And that green space needs to be more accessible, and it has to be protected at all costs.
Right. Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, so I'm going to move on to a next question. Thank you, Isabel. So the housing crisis and housing duty policy has meant that a lot of residents have fallen through the cracks between boroughs. So where they're forced to move from one borough to another and then end up with no borough accepting duty to house them. And that's part of the reason why they end up homeless. What will you do to ensure that there's more central government funding put to resolve the housing crisis and more joined up working between boroughs to put an end to the interborough lack of accountability for homeless residents? If I can ask Ayrton, please, to answer that one.
So I might have to ask you to repeat part of that question, but regarding the first part, what I'm calling for as part of my manifesto is something called a wealth tax on the mega rich. Now, in short, about the top 10% of wealthy people in the UK own around 50% of all the private wealth in the UK, while the lowest 70% are sharing about 20% of the wealth in the UK. So there's a huge wealth inequality in the UK, and that's a main issue that I'm going to be fighting for to resolve many of the issues, not just housing. So I believe that by implementing a wealth tax on the top 10%, for example, I don't have the exact facts and figures yet, but I believe we can generate around 325 billion pounds each year to go into public services, including housing. And, you know, bearing in mind that from income tax, we roughly get about 250 billion pounds a year. So that's a significant number. We can potentially double the budget for things like housing. So that's something that I'm definitely calling for. As for the second part of your question, can you please just repeat that?
Where no borough accepts responsibility. So they move out of borough for whatever reason, and then Enfield says it's no longer their responsibility, but the borough they're in also doesn't accept responsibility. So how would you,
I believe
boroughs in central London moving their residents into Enfield and then not accepting responsibility?
Well, I believe until a resident officially registers with another borough, they remain the responsibility of the borough that they're either living on or leaving. So I want to completely abolish that kind of culture and just make sure that boroughs are taking more responsibility for their constituents, for their residents.
Thank you very much. Can I ask Isabel, please, to?
Yeah, sure. I mean, to answer the second part of your question, if we freed up housing to be used as accommodation rather than as investments, then we wouldn't have this issue of boroughs struggling to house everybody on their list. We wouldn't have people dwindling in temporary accommodation. And actually, it's a false economy because it costs so much to local authorities to house people in temporary accommodation, even though for many people it's substandard.
So what will the Green Party do?
So the Green Party is going to make sure that everybody's housed so that we don't have this backlog, these waiting lists. We're going to build social homes. Like I said, we're going to identify empty properties and give local authorities the power to purchase them, the first option to purchase them. We're going to make sure that there is also building of but safe, affordable homes, because too often we see developments popping up all over the place, but they're not affordable. And if they're not affordable, what on earth are we building them for? We have to build affordable homes, and if there's rent control to stop the astronomical rents, then there should be sufficient housing for everybody, and we won't see local authorities in taking these difficult decisions and looking to offload homeless people onto other local authorities. And the Green Party also supports a wealth tax.
Okay. So you would put more money in from central government, basically.
Yeah, we have to tax this wealth, and I think we have to start looking at it as our money.
Because you've really run over time. So,
okay.
Thank you. And can I ask Stephen, please, same question. Would you put more money from central government into the housing crisis, and how would you resolve the boroughs moving residents and not taking responsibility? You're on mute. You're on mute, Stephen. Okay. Should we come back to you, Stephen, while you resolve that? Can we come to you, Chris, please? Same question.
Yeah, sure. Look, so I think it is a really complex subject, and I think the government and the council, to be fair to both, have been trying to do a lot of work on this. But we clearly need to tighten the loopholes if there are. So not allowing someone to, any authority to escape responsibility. We can't just pass the person. It's not the person's fault if they're homeless, and collectively, government, be that local or central, needs to provide a home for that. We have got far too much temporary accommodation in use in this borough, which basically means B&Bs or hotels. That's not an acceptable place.
What would the Conservatives do? What would you do?
We wouldn't have got to this situation in the first place in Enfield, because we would have built the homes Enfield needs, particularly at Meridian Water. So unfortunately, the situation we face in Enfield is exacerbated by the incompetence of the council here.
Okay, so you're going to invest more from central government. That's basically what you're sort of saying. Yeah,
absolutely.
Okay, all right, perfect. Thank you. And can I move? Stephen, are you back now, or no? Okay, I'll go to you then, Guy.
Hi. So I think first and foremost we have to end the elephant in the room, which is the funding crisis in local government. That is where the real political will needs to be in Westminster. The next government, the next set of MPs, the next parliament need to push to get more money back into the budgets of local government, who have borne the brunt of the belt tightening that has gone far too far with regards to local government in the last decade. So we need to end that crisis, and then they can deal with, they'll have more capacity to deal with people who are in that situation. Councils shouldn't be disowning people and saying that this isn't our responsibility. And actually what's quite sad is I'm sure most of those people who work in those departments don't want to be in a position where they're doing that, but they are completely lacking capacity. It's a very tragic situation, and that's why the funding crisis in local government needs to be dealt with. On the other point in your question, which is how it was to do with how we might actually prevent this situation in the first place, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, one thing that I think we should be doing, and the Liberal Democrats are fighting for, is to make sure that councils can step in when housing associations are looking to sell off their stock. Quite often they're looking to sell off their stock because the cost of refurbishing their stock has got so high that when their stock gets dilapidated, they are in a situation where they'll make more money by selling off their stock and some private developer comes in and takes it, rather than actually refurbishing and enriching the quality of social housing stock. So that's really, really important. It's a powerful way we could fix that. So council should be stepping in to stop that from happening.
Thank you. Farrell, can I ask you to come in, please?
Thank you. Just quick to say, over the past 5 years, I've done 18,000 cases of residents, and most of my casework is housing related. No, everyone would know that it's not, there isn't magic money. The money to build new homes has to come from central government. And if that money isn't coming to local authorities, they sadly aren't able to build the houses that a local community so desperately needs. On your question around people being moved from borough to borough and no borough wanting to take responsibility, I deal with these cases on a regular basis, especially where the individual is being rehoused as a result of domestic violence. And what you will find is actually local authority is discharging their duty and claiming they don't have a duty against that person is actually illegal. They cannot do that. So I spend a lot of time, my office spends a lot of time fighting on behalf of our residents on this, and no local authority should be doing that. And where they are doing that, we need to make sure that that is corrected.
Yeah. How would you do that? How would you hold them to account?
Well, I do that so I have raised the housing issue in Parliament numerous times, including of the Prime Minister, and have written to Secretary of State. I will make sure that if we're lucky enough to go into government, the new Secretary of State for Housing sends a very clear guidance to local authorities, making them very aware of their duties towards their residents. So that there is a need to clarify and push local authorities to make sure that they deliver on their duties towards their residents.
Okay, thank you. Stephen, are you back now?
Yes. So
okay, perfect. Thank you.
Yeah. So I think answering the second point first, which local authority has responsibility. I think the easiest way would be the electoral roll, where they are on the electoral roll. I know some people aren't, but I would say most people are, or should be. So where they are based, that local authority has the ultimate responsibility. Now, in terms of falling between the cracks, one of the problems is virtually every local authority in the country doesn't have enough housing. Housing in Enfield is a lot more expensive than sort of up north. So if you move someone up north, even from central London, say Kensington to Enfield, it's going to be cheaper in Enfield. So it then becomes very difficult to move them back, because then...
So what would you do to stop that?
Well, I think one of the things we've said is have a sort of basically a sort of national register, so that where people are, or where they're based, where they start the homeless process, that we would like to see them sort of end up there, even if it's not immediate, that we can get them to move back at the first opportunity.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. I think we've got time for one more question before we move to the next segment. So there's another question here about as disabled pensioners rely on the state pension, living in private rented accommodation feels like there's no focus or interest for people in that situation. So why is there little or no easily accessible social housing available to older people? And what would you do to change that? So there's very little social housing available to pensioners. So can I ask Chris, if you can go first on that one?
Well, I mean, there's just not enough social housing, full stop. But I hope to answer the point specifically. I would imagine that the criteria, I don't know this to be fact, but I would imagine the criteria prioritises single mothers, for example, with children and so on and so forth. But yeah, if you get the total number right, then it's not a problem. And to the point others have made, £64.3 billion has been the local government settlement this year, 28.6 from central government, and 36.1 billion through council tax. So we are talking about vast sums of money here, of our money, of taxpayers' money, because I think others were they're talking about that. So, we need to get it right and we need to look after them. But under the Conservatives, pensioners will be better off because we've pledged to triple lock their pensions so that they will be better off under the Conservatives.
Okay, thank you. And can I ask you, Farrell, to go next, please? That was under a minute, Chris, so thank you.
I think, as we've said, we need housing of all tenure. We've not built the houses we needed for a very, very long time. And the funding that the government has given to local authorities is not actual funding, it's predicated on local authorities raising council tax. So the amount of money that local authorities have got is because they've been able to they've been forced to raise their council tax by a maximum, and there's only so much that they can ask local residents to pay. Anyway, so that's one on the funding. So we need the housing that we need, that the borough needs. There is a lots of housing associations once upon a time used to build housing specifically for over 55-year-olds. So that will take into account the potential needs of the older generation, and that has slowed down. So we would make sure, as part of the 1.5 million homes that we will be building across the country, will also include over 55s housing. And it's about the MP making the case for their borough as well and for their constituency. And I will continue to, as I have done over the past 5 years, fight for Enfield North to get its fair share of whatever the government is going to be delivering, in this case, the housing.
Thank you. Can I ask you, Guy, to respond to that? What would you do for pensioners in terms of housing? How would you prioritise them?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Let me just reiterate that the Liberal Democrats, because we're a party that believes that the quality and dignity of life is the most important part of policy making, have always been a party on the side of pensioners. We were the ones who pushed the triple lock into place. We are the ones who created it during the coalition government. And on housing, it all comes back to my point about a council-owned, council-run housing development company, which, Liberal Democrat councils do all through the southwest of London, something that we should be pushing for, whoever the next MP is out of anyone in this room, to governments to be encouraging all councils to be doing that. It guarantees that the right kind of housing is built, particularly for special requirements, any kind of extra utilities and anything that's needed for the wide variety of people that live in society, including and especially pensioners. So that's really, really, really important. I don't understand why more councils don't do it.
Thank you. Under a minute. Thank you. Can I ask Stephen, please?
Yeah, I think one of the things I'd like to see for sort of the older people and pensioners is more bungalows being built, because a lot of people, once they get to over a certain age, they can't get up and down stairs. So having sort of developments like that with a sort of number of housing, some bungalows, some flats, so that when people are older, they can go younger, they can go up and down the stairs. And when they're older, they can move into the bungalows. I think that'd be sort of, that's one of the things that was mentioned at one of our reform forums a little while ago, and I think that went down really well.
Okay, do you have a number or where you would think you'd build those bungalows in Enfield?
The thing is with bungalows, but they sort of take up a lot more space, so you'd have to have it on the sort of edges, which, but I think as long as they've got good transport links, then sort of the pensioners, they don't mind. They're happy to sort of jump on the bus and zoom around Enfield. And there's sort of probably lots of places on the sort of edges of Enfield where we could build lots of sort of developments like this, and they would be specialised, and maybe you'd have a sort of caretaker to look after them.
Okay, thank you very much. Isabel?
I mean, this comes down to valuing older people, and it really comes down to the obsession that we've seen with successive Tory governments of an obsession with paid work and not valuing people for any other reason other than some sort of economic purpose that they do paid work. And
so what we do,
what we would do is, the housing policies that I've already set out, that we would have a wealth tax, we would invest and make sure that there's all types of accommodation, and that includes accommodation for pensioners. But there's also lots of schemes. For example, in Scandinavia, they have schemes where for example, you build mixed housing for pensioners and also university students or college students to live side by side so that pensioners have support. I think that generally that this touches on a wider problem, which is that our older people are not properly integrated into our community. They're not valued, and that's the sign of a society in crisis. And you know, I wouldn't support building bungalows on the edges of Enfield and pensioners having to catch the bus to get into the middle. You know, they need to be amongst us, and we need to be drawing on their experience, and we need to get rid of this idea that they're not important part of the fabric of our society, because they really are.
Okay, thank you very much. And lastly, I think it's Ayrton, please.
Right, so I've already talked a little bit about how I'm going to improve funding for housing in general through a wealth tax on the mega rich. Now, as an independent candidate, I don't have all of the data in front of me, but clearly I can see with my own eyes as an Enfield resident myself that I think the priorities maybe are a little bit wrong in terms of who gets what house, because I can see a lot of people, not just elderly people, but a lot of people who are genuinely vulnerable and struggling, who are not able to get council houses, where there are other people who are completely exploiting the system and not really in need of a council house who are. So we need to do more vetting of this process. But part of my manifesto also is to call for better pensions for retired people and a fairer rent system. And as I mentioned as well, more vetting of you know, estate agents. I think estate agents need to have special measures when it comes to dealing with elderly people, for example, or disabled people, because we can't hold them to the same standards that we hold, you know, working people who are earning money and are probably in a more advantaged position to pay for private rent. So I think we need to establish a fairer and more merciful system all around, to be honest with you.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So before we move on to the next section, which is the cost of living, I just seen a comment in the chat. I think this is for Chris. No, Stephen, sorry. You mentioned when we were talking about the housing crisis, you did mention that you'll prioritize local people. So Maddie's asked in the chat, how would you go about deciding who is local to Enfield?
Okay, it's
just literally like half a minute, just answer.
Half a second. All right. Basically, how long they've lived in Enfield. If someone's lived in Enfield 20, 30, 40 years, they will be considered far more local than someone who's been here 2, 3 or 4 years or 2, 3 or 4 months. That would be the main thing.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. I hope that answers your question, Maddie. So we're going to move on now. Thank you very much for your responses to the housing section. So now we're moving on to the cost of living. So I'll hand back to Janet if you want to. Right. Janet there, you can give us the introduction to the cost of living.
Okay, sorry about that. Yeah, so cost of living, we've got some figures and some a couple of a case study as well. So in January 2024, 62% of mortgage holders were in a negative budget. Meanwhile, nearly 60% of private renters are now in a negative budget, compared to 50% of people in social housing, as private rents drive people into the red. Nearly 5 million people are in a negative budget, stuck in the red, building up debt to get by. A further 2.35 million are living on empty, only escaping a negative budget by cutting their essential spending back to unsafe levels, just to keep their heads above water. They're breaking even, but only by going hungry, sitting in cold and damp homes, or not getting around as much as they used to. 10% of Enfield households have an annual gross household income of less than £15,000. That was a figure from 2023. And 32% have an income lower than 30,000, sorry. According to council data, the average rent for a one bed is around £13,208 a year. That's about £1,150 a month, rising to 24 grand for a 4-bed family home. up to 2,000 per month. As you can see, the comparison between income and rental values is well above what should be, what some think tanks believe the 30% of income should cover. Despite improving inflation rates, the cost of living crisis is not over yet. I believe we've got a case study, one of our clients, that's been, obviously the name's been changed. I think, Panos, if you can bring that up for me. Bear with me, sorry. Okay, so this is Amina's story, and I'll give you a little bit of background about her case. Sorry, it's just it's terribly slow. He was in her former property since 2010 and was evicted from that property in 2023 as she couldn't keep up with the rent. She's not working and she's a full-time carer for her son. In 2022, her son had a fall and she's been back and forth to hospital appointments, etc. since that time and become his full-time carer. All her children were born in Enfield. She has a daughter who has recently been diagnosed with autism, as well as her son who's got long-term health problems. Amina said she initially reduced her hours of work to attend to her son, but then had to give up work completely to look after him as it was just too difficult. As a result of the change of circumstances, she's fallen behind on her bills. She owes 6,800 in council tax, which she thought was going to be written off. And some of those arrears stemmed from back when she was working and she had an overpayment. Sorry, I've got a problem with my screen. Just bear with me. So that's Amina's budget on the screen. I've got the rest of her details here. Amina is also fallen behind on other bills and often juggles between feeding her family to pay payment for other essentials, such as heating, etc. And due to rising costs and no increase in her income, her budget, Amina said her family's mental health are all being affected by the situation, because obviously it's, it's hard telling your children they can't have this and they can't have new uniform. So that is her full total income from universal credit and carers allowance, and her total outgoings. She's got a negative of £692.74 available for creditors, priority debts of £11,365.31, and then non-priority debts of over £40,000. It's not an unusual story, unfortunately. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Janet. Okay, so you've heard from one of our clients, and it's like, as Janet said, it's not an unusual story. So off the back of that, one of the questions that's coming from Regina is, if elected, what are your plans to tackle the cost of living crisis in our area? If I can ask Stephen first, please.
Okay, so I think that there's that example where someone can't work. There's certain examples where people can work. I think for the cost of living crisis, one of the big things we would do is raise the personal income tax allowance to £20,000. That will mean that every person who's working on low income would get basically an extra £800 extra, I think, per month. So that would mean that those people on low incomes would get more money. Also, anyone who was on benefits who could work, who was thinking, well, it's not really worth it because what I get at the end of the day is worth less, then that would incentivize them to move into working. Now, another problem is the cost of living crisis is inflation, prices going up, housing going up, energy going up, food going up. Because of COVID, that caused inflation, so everything went up. So I think we've talked about sort of housing, and then trying to, I'll talk about, I'm sort of running out of time, but other policies for reducing energy prices and food prices, basically reducing sort of the taxes that are on sort of basically subsidise the taxes on energy that people have to pay, so bring down those costs as well.
Right, okay, thank you very much. And if I can ask Beryl, same question.
Thank you. Under the last Labour government, we lifted over 500,000 children and over 1 million pensioners out of poverty. But we know this has been reversed. And in the last couple of years, mortgages have been skyrocketing. We've had the highest tax burden in 70 years. And I know residents are really struggling, and something has to change. And as we've heard, one of the causes of cost of living crisis is energy prices. And Labour has a long-term plan to deliver energy independence and cut our bills for good. So as a first step, Labour will launch Great British Energy Company to take back control of our energy supply and produce cheaper power for our country, and ensure that the profits from this company go back to our community. Another issue is that work doesn't pay enough for people to live on, and Labour will make sure that work pays. So we will ban zero-hour contracts and abolish fire and rehire, and we will boost workers' rights. And we will also remove the age bands for minimum wage, which means younger people get less. And this is impacting families and impacting children in our communities as well. And that's why I believe that free school meals that the Mayor of London has already introduced is saving families on average £1,000 a year. And we will also introduce free school meals for children, so that children get a healthy meal in the morning and healthy lunch in the afternoon. But I know all of this has to be underpinned by economic stability and strong economic growth, which Labour will do.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for that. And can I ask Guy, please, to respond?
Hi, yeah, absolutely. Here's just a handful of things we can do to solve the cost of living crisis that the Liberal Democrats are proposing. Number one among them is that we can bring energy bills down. Firstly, by continuing to offer support for bills by introducing a windfall tax on the largest oil and gas companies who have been profiteering out of the last few years situation. Another thing we can do with regards to energy bills is to launch a massive new insulation project across the country to insulate homes up and down this country, make sure that all new homes are insulated as well. This would bring energy bills down for millions and millions and millions of people. Another thing that we can do that's really, really important, I think, is to deal with the cost of food, the cost of your weekly shop. And that begins with a national food strategy to make sure that we're working with farmers all over the country to create, more economically viable forms of food production, which at the moment we've got a broken relationship between our supermarkets and our farmers that is not helping what is already a pre-existing inflationary push towards our food prices. But we also want, and it'd be no surprise to many people to hear, the Liberal Democrats want to fix our broken relationship with Europe. Every other party is willing to ignore this elephant in the room, but we're not. At the end of the day, we are outside the European single market, and that is costing us billions and billions per year. It's driving the cost of food and other goods up, and it's not helped the cost of living crisis. So we have to fix our broken relationship with Europe, because it is one of the many very important factors addressing the cost of living crisis.
Thank you very much. Thank you for that. Can I ask Isabel, please?
Thank you, Nana. I think that Amina's story is absolutely heartbreaking, and it's not an unusual story. It's a story that we hear time and time again. This is somebody whose income is half of what she needs for basics, and the Green Party campaigns everywhere for people to receive £80 extra a week, which is what they need for absolute bare minimum basics, and this government admit openly that they give people less than they need for absolute basics. We have to be really clear what that means. You know, if you live in deprivation, your life expectancy is 10 or 20 years less than somebody who can. Yeah, well, I just think we need to be clear that there shouldn't be a crisis. You know, the corporate profits are not in crisis. Corporate profits are at an all-time high. Shareholders are not in crisis. The cabinet of billionaires are not in crisis. They're not feeling the pinch.
What would the Green Party do to reverse?
So what the Green Party will do is deal with that directly. We need to tax those people who are taking money that essentially is not theirs, you know, and and it's also then how you spend that tax money, because if you raise tax revenue, there's no point raising tax revenue. We've seen tax go up and up over the course of the last few governments. If you then hand it straight back to those people as subsidies, as through government contracts, so you also have to limit how that money is spent and make sure it's spent directly on people. And yes, we have to raise benefits. Yes, we have to insulate homes. Yes, we have to get rid of 0-hour contracts. And yes, we need rent controls. You know, all of that will alleviate people's situation.
Thank you. So I think you've made the point. You're going to raise taxes to fund those things, presumably. Okay, thank you.
On the very rich, not on you, not on you and I, on people that spend £500 on their shoes.
On the wealthy, and use that to fund these issues. Okay, can I ask Ayrton, please?
Yeah, so far I really like everything that I've heard from all of the candidates, but although I don't question their will and their desire to actually implement all of these things, I actually don't think that any of this will be possible until we really start exploring a wealth tax on the mega rich individuals and corporations. And I think besides myself and the Green Party candidate, I've not heard that from any of the other candidates. So that's definitely something that we need to explore and have that wealth.
How you would go about that? How would you go about that wealth tax?
Well, as an independent candidate, I can only fight for it the best I can in Parliament, and by teaming up with other MPs who have a similar mindset to me. And we also need to make sure that whatever's generated from that wealth tax on the mega rich trickles down into the right places and really gets the wheel spinning again in the UK economy, bring back people's power to buy and to, you know, increase jobs and, you know, really rejuvenate the economy. And who's going to win from this situation? It's not just the poorest who will be receiving, you know, those greater opportunities, but it's also the wealthy business owners as well who are going to be sacrificing a part of that tax, but that's going to be coming back to them through more consumerism in society as well. So it's going to help the economy all around, in my opinion.
Okay, thank you very much. And can I ask the same question to Chris, please? Thank
you. Thank you. Well, look, I think others have mentioned this, but two huge inflationary pressures in the last period: COVID clearly, and the war in Ukraine. So inflation was in double digits, as we know. Because we've stuck to the plan with Rishi and Jeremy, inflation is back down to 2%. And today announced the energy price cap has come down again today. It's been announced today. So it's working. We just need to stick with us now and stick with the plan. We've done the hard yards. We've done the difficult bit through COVID, through the inflationary pressures that were caused by Putin invading Ukraine, and we've already begun to reduce the tax burden on people this year. And there's more of that to come if you stick with the Conservatives. If we end up with a Labour government on Friday morning, every family.
I'm going to stop you, Chris. We just want to know what the Conservatives are going to continue.
We will stick with the plan. We will continue to bring taxes down. We will continue to keep inflation at 2%. Mortgage rates will now follow. We know it's been tough, but we need to stick with the plan now and continue to deliver.
Thank you. So I have a question now from the Q&A. It's an anonymous one. So the question is, as an elected MP for Enfield North, what would a policy look like under each candidate, to balance the inequality that's not only in Enfield North, but also around the rest of the borough? So how would you balance the inequalities? If I can, since you're there, Chris, if I can ask you first, if that's okay. Mute.
Yeah, I was trying to get rapidly trying to get back off mute. That wasn't as easy as it should have been. So look, I think we need to stick with the plan, and like I was just saying, we've been through a particularly tough time, and of course that hits those that are least well off, the hardest, and that's why it's important that those that are able to work, there is good, well-paid jobs for them to be able to, because the easiest way out of poverty is to work your way out of poverty, accepting that some people are unable to work because they're either carers or not well enough to, and therefore the welfare system for universal credit should be able to support those people to an acceptable standard, a good standard of living, because enough people are in work to support those that are unable to. So I think, stick with us, stick with the plan. The Prime Minister's promised, if we win the election, to reform the welfare system further to reduce those inequalities, and that's what you'll see with the Conservatives.
Thank you very much. Can I ask you, Farrell? That was in under a minute. Brilliant.
We're getting good at this.
We're getting messy. Exactly. Okay, can I ask you, Farrell, please?
There are many inequalities that I can address that are affecting the east of the borough. The one that I want to talk about is health inequalities. When you cross the A10 into east of the borough, a woman lives 18 years of her her life in poor health. At the moment, the east of the borough is poorly served by primary care, so people can't get GP appointments. Our hospitals are under incredible pressure. So one of the areas that I've been fighting at the moment for residents on is health. So it's the 40,000 appointments that will be generated and that will help tackle the health inequalities. The investment into dentistry will help deal with the issues that we have with our children not being able to access dentistry in that area. But yeah, it's primary care. It's the doctors. It's investing in the 15,000 medical school places that will deliver the doctors that we need. It's investing in midwives who we actually need for our hospitals. So it is about tackling the health inequalities. I think that would be one of the biggest ones. But as I said, all the others around health, income inequalities will be delivered for all the other things I said earlier. Sorry, I'm rushing, but thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, can I ask Isabel, please?
Yeah, I actually agree with Ferriol about health. We've got millions of people on waiting lists. We've got a public health crisis because we've underfunded the NHS, and we give all of the money that the NHS does have to private providers who then squirrel it away in the Cayman Islands and buy themselves £500 shoes. Like, I don't want to be flippant, but that we need to talk about this class of people who are just taking what is our money and using it as their personal slush fund. So I think we do need to focus on health. We need GP appointments. But listen, we've got this great piece of legislation called the Equality Act. And what the Equality Act says is that every single decision that both local and central government make, they must act to reduce inequality. Now, does anybody think that any government has been doing that? Because they're not following the law. Every tiny decision they make.
How would the Green Party make sure that does happen?
We have to, we have to act to reduce inequality, and health inequality is a big one. It's a really big one. And like I said, rent controls. Stop treating property as an asset. Stop looking at people who pay more council tax as more of an asset to your council and more important to your council than people who pay less council tax. End the obsession with work and money, and just look at what value people actually have as individuals.
Thank you very much. Okay, and Guy, please, could you respond to that?
Yeah, absolutely. Three things then on health inequalities. Liberal Democrats have a plan to
inequalities in general.
Well, sure, but so this is my first point. So on the first point about health inequality, and one of the key things, I know firsthand. I grew up in Enfield North and know exactly what it's like. We would raise capital gains tax on the wealthiest. So we'd be reforming the system to make sure that the wealthiest are paying more capital gains tax. That raises about $5 billion that you can spend on the NHS to make sure that there are thousands more GPs. We can deal with the waiting times, and that can help people all over the borough, those who especially can't afford private healthcare, like I know I can't, and most of us can't. And the second point is that we need to stop penalising people who are in difficult situations, and that's what we've seen from the recent governments. We Liberal Democrats are committed to scrapping the 2-child limit on universal credit, and it's quite frustrating to see the Labour Party not do the same. And also one final thing I'd point out is opportunity. Opportunity is the absolute crucial part. It's the thing that makes life meaningful and powerful. It's the thing that puts our economy into something that actually is on the right track. So that means reforming business rates. It means that making sure that our high streets in the east of Enfield are actually, you know, as vibrant as they can be, with good work opportunities for people. Let's face it, it's not just the economic situation in the east of the borough. It's also the fact that the high streets, the jobs, that the opportunities in the east of the borough aren't there that they are in the west of the borough. We should be looking for all of them, and that's something that, as an MP, I would be, you know, I'd be fighting for.
Okay, thank you. And if I can ask Ayrton, please. Thank you. Same question.
Right. So what I can see with my experience of Enfield in general is that there are certain communities in certain areas that seem to be on this kind of long-term downward spiral, and that locks them into this life of poverty. And it starts from a very young age, when young people, they don't have the opportunities after they graduate school. They don't have the chance to upskill and to seek jobs and to seek employment, and really they don't have role models even to look up to inspire them, to give them something to work towards. And that results in a lot of young people turning to a life of drugs, crime, antisocial behavior, extremism, you name it. And this is rampant. This is rampant in many parts of Enfield. And I would actually, as part of my wealth tax reinvestments back into the poorer communities, really invest into creating more opportunities for young people particularly, so that they can lead their communities generation after generation out of this cycle that they're stuck in, and really just reverse the trend that's happening in those areas, and give them a chance to actually catch up and work their way out of it with dignity, with confidence, with honor.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. And finally, Stephen.
Okay, so I think what you've got to, everyone's got to admit is there will always be some inequality. Some people will always be richer than others. So what we've got to do is, instead of having sort of the west being up here and the east being down here, realise that it's never all going to be up here. We've got to bring people up to a certain level, and the way we want to do that is by to create sort of jobs for people. It's not going to work for everyone, but at the moment we've probably got more people receiving money from the government than putting in. So that's not really acceptable or affordable long term. So what we would do, like I said, raise the tax-free limit to 20,000, which means that all the poorer people, or poorer workers, I should say, plus pensioners, would keep more money. Another thing we're doing on the opposite side for the employees is for the employers. So we would lift the VAT threshold to £150,000 for small business. That means small business don't get to a certain level and then stop growing. They can get to a much higher level and keep growing there and employ more people. We'd also lift the minimum profit threshold to £100,000, which again, you've got all these small businesses, they grow, they stop because of these artificial tax limits. Upping the limits a lot would mean those little businesses, they will grow. And as they grow, they will employ just one or two more people each, but they will employ local people. And doing that will be, sorry, I'm running out of time, but I like this. But doing that will mean that we'll get more people in business, and that will help stop inequality.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Oh, I've got Chris, you got your hand up. Did you want to?
One very quick point, that there's more people in work than out of work. The current unemployment rate in the country is 4.4%, according to the government website. I've just looked it up.
Okay.
Yeah, does
that apply in Enfield?
Sorry, if I said something that was wrong, then I apologise. What I meant was when people sort of paying into the system and taking out of the system as opposed to people working. That's just overall numbers in the whole country.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to move on to another question. The next question is: the voluntary sector are doing so much to support residents in the cost of living crisis, yet there is really sobering analysis from the NCVO on how little the voluntary sector is mentioned in any of the manifestos of the major parties. So what would you do to ensure that the voluntary sector is adequately funded and supported to respond to the cost of living crisis? And one of the sort of live examples at the moment is Community House, where the rents have been increased, and that's put in a number of the charities there at risk of closure because they can't afford to survive. So if I can ask Farrell first, please, that question. What would you do to support the voluntary sector and to make sure that they're adequately funded?
Yeah, the voluntary sector in Enfield is the backbone of our community. Where the local authorities have been unable to support the community, the voluntary sector has stepped in to fill in the gap, whether that's youth work, whether that's the support for domestic violence. I work very closely with the voluntary sector organisations across the borough, and when you look at the commitments that Labour Party has made, for example, the creation of youth hubs that will deliver support and youth work and mental health support to young people. We will be working very closely with the voluntary sector organisations, where we are requiring every local authority, for example, as part of our of the partnership, the community safety partnership, that will require work with the third sector, with the voluntary sector. So there will be many opportunities for the voluntary sector to deliver the services. So a lot of the commitments we have will include the voluntary sector in delivering those services. In terms of the issues you raise with the property, it is really alarming. I've only recently heard about that, and it's an issue at the moment, sadly, because I'm still a candidate, I can't raise. But if I'm lucky enough to get elected, it's an issue that I intend to raise with the local authority and to work with the voluntary sector to fight against, I think, because to have a viable voluntary sector, we need to make sure they can actually stay in Enfield.
Okay, thank you. All right, thank you. And Erton, can I ask you the same question, please?
Well, I'm not sure how relevant this question is to me because it seemed more geared towards parties. But obviously, if I do get elected as an independent MP for Enfield North, the voluntary sector is something I'm going to be fighting to protect the best that I can possibly do. And again, it comes back to going through and reviewing regulations on the rental sector when it comes to even private shops on the high street and things like that, and offices where giving allowances for more vulnerable people or more vulnerable organizations such as the third sector to kind of really help vulnerable people in the community and to make things easier for them, because the more we help these people, the more we help ourselves in general as a society. And we can't leave these people behind because a few greedy people up top can't have enough money, really. So yeah,
okay,
that's what
thank you. Right, thank you very much. And can I ask you, Guy, what would you do to support the voluntary sector?
I think a couple of key things. Firstly, the voluntary sector is the backbone of our area, but that's largely because they're filling in a role that local government has either had to surrender or is unfortunately not fulfilling. One thing the Liberal Democrats would do is try and address those problems that the voluntary sector is picking up the cracks in, so that we can essentially take some of the slack off them. A lot of that is to do with reforming social care. And increasing the carers allowance, which is something that we've been pushing for a very long time, expanding eligibility for the carers allowance and making sure that we can defend people who are in a position to need access to these organisations. The other key thing is I think you just need a strong local champion as your MP who knows the voluntary sector well, who knows the organisations in the local area. I worked in hospitality for years in this area. I know all the local charities and organisations. I know the problems that they face. I know how they go about fundraising and know how to pull the right levers. I think that's what being a local community champion means as your MP. It's constantly meeting with the voluntary sector. It's treating them on equal parity as the public sector and the private sector.
Thank you very much. Can I ask Stephen, please?
Yeah, so I think in theory it'd be great if sort of the government or the state and then sort of private companies or profit could sort of provide everything. And I think the way we are at the moment is just not possible. And having a great voluntary centre, the number of charities is phenomenal. So I think for us, it would just be support the charities in the work they do in providing things like food banks, youth clubs, things like that. And also just support them with fundraising, because if they can raise the money locally, they spend it locally, they know they've got the best local knowledge, probably better than sort of anyone in government or anyone in local government, about what needs to be spent where. So just be there for all the different charities wherever possible, especially with fundraising.
Thank you. And sorry, finally, no, not finally, Isabel, and then
yeah. I mean, I think it's, you know, what the voluntary sector does is fantastic. But again, it shouldn't be expected to plug the gaps, you know, and this is something that we heard about in 2010 with the big society, you know, and then we started with food banks. You know, it's not up to the voluntary sector to feed people. It's not up to the voluntary sector to, you know, to give refuge to people. This is all something that, you know, that in a welfare state that the government should be doing. And yes, we have to fund the voluntary sector, but we also have to look at taking away some of the responsibility that we've handed to them that is absolutely not their responsibility. And again, you know, the very simple policy of having rent controls, you know, would avoid this problem that we're seeing now with you see it not only with community house, but you see it in lots of places that voluntary sector organisations can't afford rent just to keep their offices open. And you know, we have to, they shouldn't be doing half the work that they're doing, in my view.
So would you support with funding, additional funding, or
we would fund them, but also we would take away, you know, if you had a green government, you wouldn't need food banks, because, you know, in a country where the supermarkets are overflowing with food, people who have a right to live have a right to food, and people would have food, you know. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much for your point. We've got your point. Chris, please.
Thank you. Well, firstly, huge thank you to all the people in the borough who volunteer in whichever way. I think back to the pandemic, and I volunteered, and we teamed up cross-party and Enfield Council to deliver food parcels to the vulnerable throughout that period, which we funded from within council resources. I also volunteer in a youth organisation, so I get it and I understand. And I think, you know, as I say, we've been through a really tough time. Of course, the current situation isn't ideal, but it's getting better, and it will continue to get better under a Conservative government. And you know, I'll just say what I said before, urge you to stick with the plan. It's beginning to work. We can see that, like I said today, with the energy price cap coming down, with inflation coming down. We've just got to stick with the plan now, and we will pull through.
Is that because you will support the voluntary sector, or because the people will be so well off they won't need the voluntary sector?
Like both, but it'll be a combination. Are we going to be in a position? Do I foresee a position where we're not going to need the voluntary sector? I don't think so, because we've had the voluntary sector for years. Yeah, ever since I've been alive, certainly. But yeah, we need to support them, and you know. The voluntary sector is marvellous because people want to help. Yeah, I think of all the soup kitchens that churches in the borough run that I've been involved in as well. Like, it's fantastic when communities come together, and we really saw that during COVID brilliantly, I think.
Thank you so much, Chris, and thank you all for your participation during this segment, which was the cost of living. And we're now going to move quickly on to the climate change and the environment. And I know we have a video from Ariana Abdul Noor, who's a local resident, and she's also the UK's youth delegate to COP28. So you're going to hear from her to put the context into this section.
Climate change is a crucial issue in the upcoming UK election, directly influencing policies on energy, infrastructure, and public health. The UK, as a leading industrial nation, has a significant role in global efforts to combat climate change. Voters are increasingly aware of the need for strong environmental policies to reduce carbon emissions and to transition to renewable energy sources. Valuing green space is crucial in the UK, where urban areas are densely populated. These spaces not only serve as carbon sinks, absorbing CO2, but also mitigate urban heat island effects, reducing temperatures in cities. Green spaces improve air quality, support biodiversity, and provide recreational areas that enhance physical and mental well-being. In the upcoming elections, both the Labour Party and Green Party are aiming for ambitious targets of net zero by 2030, focusing on a Green New Deal. Their manifestos pledge to work with private sectors to double onshore wind, triple solar power, and quadruple offshore wind, creating millions of green jobs. Both also emphasise the importance of preserving and expanding green spaces in urban and rural areas. Similarly, the Liberal Democrats and Conservative parties have also pledged to reach net zero carbon emissions by 2045 and 2050 respectively, promising significant investments in offshore wind and hydrogen energy. They both also emphasise protecting and expanding green spaces with plans to support reforestation efforts and restore peatlands, crucial for carbon sequestration. As the planet heats up, prioritising climate action and environmental preservation in this election is essential. Policies that promote sustainable practices, protect natural landscapes, and invest in green technologies will help ensure a resilient future for the UK. Voting for parties with strong climate policies ensures a commitment to a sustainable and green future, with this election serving as a crucial opportunity for voters to support leaders committed to doing so. Because the climate change emergency is so critical, we would like to hear how commitments to these pledges can be actualised so that we can see concrete changes. At such a crucial juncture, how willing are these parties to go beyond their manifesto agreement?
Right, thank you very much for that. And so I will ask the first question, and this is going to go to Isabel, the Green Party. What do you think is the issue that is most pressing related to climate change and the environment, and why? And then if you were elected as our MP, how would you plan to make your voice heard?
Yeah, I mean, the central issue, the most pressing issue is fossil fuels. We need to divest from fossil fuels. We need to do it rapidly. We need to stop subsidising. We need to. It's insanity to still be exploring and trying to find new sources of fossil fuels. You know, there's every type of energy available, and the UK is uniquely placed. So we can make more than 100% of our energy from wind alone. You know, so it's not about technology. It's not about capacity. It's not about it's just about money and you know, people that want to carry on making money from oil. So yeah, fossil fuels is the top top priority. But I mean, there's so many priorities, and what the young lady asked is how willing we are to go beyond our manifesto to address climate change. But what I'd say is that with the Green Party, you get the one party where you don't need us to go beyond our manifesto, because we know how important the environment is to our well-being, to our survival. So you know, we have it at the heart of all of our policies.
In 10 seconds, how would you make your voice heard?
You know, as an MP, I'd speak up about fossil fuels, but I'd speak up about safe food, soil quality, also consumerism, you know, because I think that our busy lives, you know, we need a 4-day week, we need a universal basic income, because our busy lives mean that we have to buy the single-use plastic, we have to buy the throwaway, you know. I think we need to address consumerism as well.
Thank you very much. Very good point. Okay, Ayrton, can I ask you?
I actually agree with pretty much everything that Isabel just said. But beyond obviously tackling fossil fuels and bringing down global warming and bringing down the sea levels and cleaning up, you know, the plastic from our seas and everything that I'm sure all the other candidates here will agree on, I think generally what we need to do is we need to promote a change of thinking, a change of culture towards our environment. Now, I actually believe there's a lot that we can learn from ancient Native American culture, where they built their societies in tune with the environment. You know, they believed in Mother Earth and not harming it. And, you know, it's a two-way thing. You know, we look after the earth looks after us. And I think there's a lot we can gain from that.
And how would
we need to put that into our education system and really drill it into people from a very, very young age. Their responsibility as human beings to look after the planet and to look after the animals and to look after the plants, because that's our responsibility. It doesn't belong to any other living creature on this planet. So we need to, instead of just campaigning for it, we need to actually, you know, teach this in schools and show young people how it's done to bring about long-term solutions.
Thank you very much. Chris, can you take a question?
Thank you very much. Yeah, look, I think, you know, I want to start by saying, look at the journey we've been on. and how much progress we've already made since 2010, which is phenomenal, accepting there's still a huge way to go. But we will hit our target of net zero by 2050, if that I'm confident. But we also have to look bigger than the UK. And we have to continue to be an influencer on the world stage, because whilst China and Russia are still producing the amount of carbon they are, what we are producing, which is obviously significantly reduced since 2010, is a drop in the ocean by comparison to those two large global contributors. So we have to continue our journey, because you can't preach to others unless we've put our own house on. So we have to continue our journey, absolutely. And the manifesto sets that out very clearly. So yeah, I need to go into too much more detail on that, but we are absolutely committed to that. But we also have to influence other countries which are much bigger polluters than us, because it's us doing our bit in isolation is not going to solve this problem. So we have to look much bigger and influence around the world as well. And we had a good start with that with COP20 up in Scotland, a couple of years ago. So this is a serious matter, and we've got a serious government that's addressing it and tackling it.
Okay, thank you. And can I ask the same question to Stephen, please?
Okay, so I think we're probably the only one who have a different view to this to everyone else. Yet we agree there may be a global climate crisis, but we don't think there's a UK climate crisis. Basically, there's a large number of big countries that are polluting far more than us, a lot more than us, and they are increasing even now. So there's a China crisis, Russia crisis, India crisis, Indonesia crisis, Saudi Arabia crisis, you name it. There's all these countries that are polluting more than us. And what we're doing, we've decarbonized more than almost any other country in the planet, which is great, which is really good. But we've done it too far, too fast, we think. Basically, with sort of our debts going up, and what we want to do is we want to fix the country's finances before we fix the planet's problems. Because all we've done, we've just closed down masses of our industry, exported that to the other side of the planet. They then produce the things we used to do, using like really dirty coal-fired power stations, and then transport it back halfway around the planet back to us. So we think it's far better for us to do things ourselves. We wouldn't hit net zero by 2050. We don't think that's achievable or affordable. And we think closing down British industry now and energy and farming and everything else, it's going to be unaffordable and unattainable.
Okay, thank you. And can I ask Beryl, please?
Thank you. If Labour is lucky enough to get into power, we will set up Great British Energy, a new publicly owned company. It will be owned by British people and deliver power back to British people. Our warmer homes plan will slash fuel poverty. It means that it will create jobs whilst reducing emissions as well as cutting people's bills. We will take on water companies and force them to clean up our rivers. Labour will not issue any new oil and gas licenses, because we know they will not take a penny off our bills, and it cannot make us energy secure, and they will only accelerate and worsen the climate crisis. As I said, we will also invest in carbon capture and storage, hydrogen and marine energy, and ensure we have the long-term energy storage that our country needs.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Under a minute. Thank you very much for that. Very, very on point. And finally, Guy, please, if you can tell us the Liberal Democrats what they will do.
Yeah, absolutely. The thing that gets left out of these conversations all the time is biodiversity. The biodiversity crisis is just as important as the climate crisis. We have a commitment in our manifesto to make sure that all new developments in the United Kingdom produce a net gain of biodiversity. That's something that I'm personally very proud of. Something that a lot of people within the Liberal Democrats, like myself, who will always push the party further and further towards being environmental champions, we're fighting for, and we're very, very glad to have that in there. Another key thing to do with dealing with the biodiversity crisis and also just the general quality of our natural environment is the level of pollution in our rivers. The Liberal Democrats have become almost quite famous for it now in terms of campaigning against sewage in our rivers, but I think it's absolutely shocking that Thames Water is allowed to get away with their millions and millions and millions of gallons of sewage dumping in our river. It's absolutely shocking, and that applies as well on effluents in rivers in London, in Enfield. On a national point, I think there was a separate question that the young lady asked about, where would we go further than our party? I'm quite committed personally, and I've said this before, to pushing for getting to net zero faster than 2045. I do think that we can maybe get there. That's just my personal opinion. I think that there's an important way of doing that, which is to set up the what we created initially in the coalition government, which was the Green Investment Bank. We built it in the coalition government. The Conservatives scrapped it as soon as we got out of office. The Labour plan for a Great British Energy is basically a cheap imitation of what we already created and that the Conservatives got rid of as soon as we left government. So Green Investment, look it up. I don't have time to finish it. Look it up.
No.
It's a great.
Brilliant. Thank you. And on point again. Thank you. All right. Okay. So the next question on the environment is, what are your committed policies for tackling climate impacts and protection of vulnerable groups in this borough? So what are your committed policies for tackling climate impact and the protection of the vulnerable groups in this borough? And do we know what specific climate change impacts are, and is there a funded national plan? It's proactive action. So I think I'll ask that one to Stephen, if that's okay.
Yeah, okay. I'm just trying to think what climate related issues we have in Enfield. I mean, I'm born and brought up here, and I sort of look outside and sort of the air is just as clean and fresh as it was when I remember when I was a kid. I know everyone's talking about sort of the planet's warming, but
there is the incinerator.
Sorry?
The incinerator.
Oh yeah, all right, okay, good. The incinerator, yeah, definitely wouldn't allow that to be expanded. It's in the wrong place. There's lots of houses at Latham School, so I would definitely be against doing that.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Can I ask Chris, please?
Well, I can say categorically, I voted against the incinerator, but our Labour Council brought that in anyway. They all voted unanimously for it. Actually, the biggest thing we can do in Enfield to protect the climate is not build 7,500 homes on our green fields. So Vicarage Farm is an area of beauty, as is Chase Park. And if the local plan goes ahead, it will have 7,500 homes. If I'm the MP, I will fight tooth and nail to save those green spaces. They should not be being built on. And it is shocking when we have the council's declared a climate emergency, which no anyone's denying we need to tackle this, is then, in the other hand, saying they're going to build homes all over the Greenbelt. I absolutely categorically would not be doing that, and I will fight it tooth and nail if I'm the Member of Parliament.
Okay, thank you. And can I ask Isabel, please?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many things we do. Yes, absolutely. The stinking incinerator should not be built, and it should not be built in that deprived area. It would never be built, in some areas in the west of the borough. We all know why it's built in that area, because, the council and the developers think that the people that live there don't matter. We need to insulate homes. Energy prices have gone up. We need to insulate homes so people aren't spending money on energy. We need to provide proper medical care so that, if people are suffering from climate extremities. But the other thing that we can do is plant trees in residential areas, because that keeps them cool. It also keeps the air clean. We've got a clean air crisis. We need to keep the air clean. So, making sure that there are and that also rainwater fall off, so you don't have the flooding that you sometimes see when you have these torrential downpours, that your streets are flooding, your storm drains are flooding. We need rainwater gardens as well.
So thank you. It's quite interesting you see there, but Stephen thinks that the air is quite clean. So you disagree with him, I take it, on that point?
That the air is clean. The air is not clean. We reached the tipping point for the day. I mean, the air is full of carbon dioxide to begin with, which is heating us all up. But the UK and London in particular, it regularly exceeds the safe legal global limit for clean air, and we see 10,000 excess deaths per year from dirty air. So to say the air is clean is just a lie, to be honest.
Okay, right. Well, I've never heard the 10,000 excess deaths.
Yeah, I mean it's
all right.
Well,
I can send you
yeah,
I can send you the source if you like.
Yeah.
I think it's an
Okay,
accepted
thank
government.
you.
I mean, maybe Ferriol can say it's an accepted government figure that we have
Well,
10,000 excess deaths per
it's-
year.
Well, I'll move on
Well,
to
all
Ferriol.
I'm saying is I've
Ferriol.
lived in, I've
You know,
been
we've
in
got
a long
Ella.
time.
We've got the case of Ella, which is the first, the little girl from Lewisham, which is the very first case that was attributable to air pollution, and you know, nine-year-old. That's not the only one, Stephen.
Okay.
That is the
Can I just
landmark
bring this
case
back?
which recognised that air pollution causes death and in children.
Thank you, Isabel. Thank you. Ferriol, can I just bring you in here for that question?
Why can't I? Right. The excess deaths is actually 48,000. 48,000 adults die prematurely each year in the UK due to air pollution. UK is the only country that was taken to court for illegal emissions and lost the court case. Well, you can walk down the street. If you stand by a bus stop, you can actually sometimes taste it in your mouth. When I'm taking my children down to nursery and I stop at the lights, I know where the buggy is. It's right next to, it's at the car exhaust level. It terrifies me. We wouldn't allow our children to drink dirty water. Why are we allowing them to inhale dirty air? So air quality is one of the biggest issues. And our emission, I would say what the Mayor of London has done with ULEZ is really, really important. Emissions also, one of the biggest sources of emissions in Enfield is from building, is domestic gas use. So through insulating our homes, we will tackle, that is the biggest source of emission in Enfield. The second one is transport. It's private transport. That's the biggest source of emissions. So we need to invest into expanding the public transport. I've been working with local groups to improve the frequency of trains in Enfield. I will continue that to make sure it's both lobbying central, well, if we're lucky enough to have a Labour government, to make sure that there is that is raised with the mayor, but it's also buses. It's making sure that the Mayor of London
Sorry,
it's just, we need to improve public transport.
Okay, thank you. And can I ask you, Guy?
Yeah, look, all I can say is that I'm sorry to say this, Stephen, but the reason your party is the only one that is not in agreement with everyone else here is because it's the only one that's not in agreement with the prevailing opinion in the scientific community. The air quality in this borough is shockingly bad. There was an article last year that reported about 150-ish people in Enfield alone die every year from.
So what will the Liberal Democrats do? What were the policies that you bring in?
I mean, for what we could rehash the conversation about all the similar things. We can talk about public transport. We can talk about insulating homes. All the things that I've already spoken about today. But one of the key things is research and development and fighting for carbon scrubbing technology. That's an absolute vital part of the future in this country. It's something that I'm really proud that we're committed to. It's something that we have to be able to spend the money on, because that's the kind of thing that if we invest in it now, it guarantees our future. This is the kind of technology that can genuinely make a huge change. It can't all be achieved through technology. It can't all be done just by a silver bullet that we'll find through research and development, but a significant amount of the problems that we face, particularly around air quality, can be addressed by investing in carbon scrubbing technology, and that's something that Liberal Democrats will be doing.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And finally, Ayrton, please. What policies do you think you would bring in to tackle climate impacts?
Well, in Enfield particularly, definitely that Edmonton incinerator has to go. Now, my background is actually in journalism. Not all of you will know that. And I was one of the first, I think, journalists to actually start covering that in the news when I was working for My London. And I was working with an NHS doctor based in North Middlesex Hospital who was leading the protests against that. So I've been on board with that from the very beginning. And another thing that I'm surprised that other candidates haven't mentioned here is actually the fly tipping crisis that we have all over Enfield nowadays. And I think a part of that is due to the fact that we've got such a huge swelling of population in the past couple of years, mainly down to the fact that there's so many HMO properties now. And the council bins that are being provided for homes is simply just not enough to handle the amount of waste that's being produced by these homes now. Whereas there used to be 3, 4, 5 people living in those homes before, now there might be 10, 15 people living in those homes. And this is actually becoming a normal thing, and young people are growing up in Enfield seeing this with their eyes and thinking, oh, this is normal. So we need to tackle this. We need to nip it in the bud, because this fly tipping is terrible to look at. It's terrible to smell, and it just doesn't reflect. We're not a third world country here. Come on, we shouldn't be having this in Enfield. We're the second biggest borough in London, and this is not something we need to be setting.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. Okay, well, that was quite informative ideas of what you're all going to commit to in terms of your policies, and all very similar but also different. So we're sort of at the end of this segment of climate change, and we've got quite a few questions actually in the Q&A. So I'm going to come to Panos in a minute to ask a question, but there is one question that has been submitted and we've asked of all the other constituencies, so I'll ask this one. And this question is, will any of the candidates agree that our current first past the post voting system is broken, and will they advocate for a new system based on proportional representation? So if I can ask Chris first, please.
No, I don't think it's broken. I think you are electing here in Enfield North someone to represent you. You can choose whoever you like from the panel here this evening, or even the person who's not here this evening, but you are choosing someone to go and represent you in Parliament. And that's why I don't think the system is broken, because under proportional representation, you vote for a party, not for a person. And I firmly believe you should be voting for the person to represent you in Parliament.
Okay, thank you. Very succinct and within a minute. Thank you. Stephen, can I ask you, please? Unmute again. Okay, we'll come back to you. Guy, can you come in?
Hold on. Sorry.
Oh, you're back. Okay, good.
Yeah, I was muted. Yeah, we have proportional representation as one of the core policies, so we would be pushing for that. We think it's a much better way of the first past the post. What you're going to see probably is Labour sort of gets, I don't know, maybe 30% of people, those who vote, maybe 60% of the seats. It's totally disproportionate. Just that's the way the first past post works sometimes. And we feel proportional representation just gives a much better way of everyone in the country. They're far more likely to get someone with their views in power, proportional to the way the vote goes across the whole country.
Okay, yep. Thank you. Perfect. And Guy, can you tackle that question as well, please?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, the Labour and Conservative parties both saying that they don't want proportional representation is a bit like Man City and Chelsea saying they don't want financial fair play enforced appropriately. At the end of the day, it's a system that keeps the two-party system, the two-party politics we have in power. You've seen how bad that's been for our country. The Liberal Democrats, shock horror, have been fighting against that for well over a century now. We're absolutely committed to proportional representation. It will fix so many of the problems that we're facing just by bringing people together, making sure people feel that their vote actually means something, and going a long way to dealing with the lack of trust that people feel in politics right now. Frankly, a lot of people watching this right now are probably thinking, why should I trust any of you? And I get that. I completely get that. 90% of the time, your vote doesn't count anyway. So let's do something about it. Let's get proportional representation. Let's have more of a constructive conversation in Parliament through proper representation of the various parties and various opinions in this country. Proportional representation, it's a hallmark of Liberal Democrat values. Please, if you support PR, you know which party's for you.
Thank you. Oh, and just in a minute, thank you. And can I ask Erton, please?
Right, so regarding first past the post, I don't really have any strong opinions for or against it, to be honest with you. But I'm actually trying to promote principle-based politics. I don't really believe so much in party politics anymore. I don't believe in supporting your political party like you support your football team. I'm a Spurs supporter. I'll support Spurs whether they win the league or whether they get relegated. But regarding my political party, that's not the case. I stay true to my principles, and that's why my motto is vote for principle, not for party. And I also don't believe in personality cults either. So I think, ideally, I think every political candidate should be an independent and should be representing their personal values and principles to their constituents, and then their constituents should be voting for them based on that.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. And Isabel, please.
Yeah, I mean, we've heard this argument about the first past the post system and the personal connection that it preserves being trotted out. But actually, in Scotland, in Wales, in the London Assembly, we've had the additional member system for many years now. It works perfectly well. You still retain that personal connection. You still get the person that you voted for, but on top of that, you get additional members in the proportions that the entire of the electorate voted for. And, so from a Green point of view, if we've got one MP, Caroline Lucas, but we've got 1 million people that vote Green, if we had a proportional representation system, you'd have 22 Green MPs, and boy, would they hold the government to account over the environment and everything that really matters.
Thank you very much. And finally, Ferrell, please.
So I will get accused of not being one of the parties that's not supporting. I don't think I agree with Chris in that it does break that connection with the constituency. How many of us can name all of the London-wide Assembly members? And I think that connection between the MP and the constituency is really, really important, and that accountability is really important. I think for us, it's about increasing participation, improving participation in politics, and that's why we will introduce votes at 16. So, and we would also, we will also protect democracy by strengthening the rules around donations to political parties as well.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that. Very interesting and diverse answers. Okay, Chris, you've got your hand up. Did you want to?
As I didn't use it 1 minute, the only thing I'll say in response to the guy is when we were in coalition, this was part of the coalition deal, we had a referendum on it. It's somewhere, I think around 20, so I can't remember, but the country voted no to it. They didn't want proportional representation. So relatively recently, we've done that. We've asked the public what they want.
Can I use a few seconds of my 1 minute as well?
Yeah, so okay, just let Guy come in and then
go.
Yeah, no worries. Chris,
but literally 10 seconds.
Yeah, Chris, it was the AV referendum. It happened in 2011, and AV is not a form of proportional representation. Not really surprising, though, that the Conservatives can't tell the difference between proportional representation and an unfair system.
Time up. All right, Ferrell. Thank you, Guy.
I was first of all, I don't have any football analogies, sadly, although I'm a Spurs fan. I would say the one time I remember a coalition government was the Liberal Democrats and Tory coalition in 2010, and it resulted in the Liberal Democrats abandoning quite a lot of their commitments. And I think it does weaken, the commitments that you make to your constituents that you get elected on, you end up having to sacrifice quite a lot of those. So just a bit of advice to leave them, colleagues.
Okay. Perfect. All right, thank you. I'm going to have to stop it there. Sorry, we're running out of time, and I really want to get at least one more question from the chat. So panels, can you just give us one more question from the chat, and we'll give everyone 30 seconds now to.
Yep.
Okay.
So what will the candidates do to regenerate the east side of the borough, which is being more and more left behind?
Thank you. And if I can ask Guy that question first.
Yeah, I mean, I feel we've covered a lot of it already, but the important thing is opportunity, economic opportunity. I want to see that we reform business rates so that we can have more vibrant high streets in the east of the borough, so that people can work, so that people can feel that it's a place that they can enjoy living in, and everything else that we've said about dealing with the cost of living crisis, so that we can, treat every part of Enfield the same as others.
All right, thank you. And Ayrton, 30 seconds.
A lot of my campaigning has actually been based in the east, and many of the small business owners are complaining about the cycle lanes and the ridiculous things that are done to the high streets there. So we need to really actually work on new development projects in cohesion with small business owners and residents, in ways promote projects that prioritize them and not leave them behind.
Thank you. And Farrell?
One of the things I have achieved for the east of the borough was the banking hub, and I'll make sure that is delivered, because all of the bank branches in the east of the borough around in the town centre shut down, meaning that all the businesses had to travel into town to be able to do their banking. And a Labour Party will deliver more banking hubs across the country, but I will make sure that the one I've secured for Enfield North will be delivered in 2024. Labour will also abolish business rates. And sorry, okay, fine.
Time up.
One more.
You'll still have some time to say your piece. Okay, and Chris, please.
Well, I've already touched on it, but I'm quite happy to talk about it again. One of the biggest failings of this Labour Council has been the mismanagement of Meridian Water. That's a huge redevelopment with not just homes, but all the infrastructure that should have gone with it in terms of GP surgery, schools, etc., etc. That would bring employment opportunities, and therefore through that regeneration scheme, really improve the east of the borough. And it's not about, if I was the MP, I would really be trying to work with the council and put pressure on them to deliver that project in a more timely fashion, because we're now talking about 2040 and it should be completed now. It should have happened already.
Thank you. And Stephen, please.
For the east side of the borough, I think, like we said a few times before, just promote small business, make it a lot easier to start small businesses. I think, as Erton said, one of the things that comes up again, time and time again, especially when I've been speaking to the eastern side of the borough, is cycle lanes in the high street. Virtually every business owner hates them with a vengeance. They say they're killing their business. So I would scrap the cycle lanes in the high streets, not anywhere else, because in residential areas that's fine. But that would mean that we could sort of get those businesses up and running again. That would build the extra business, get more people working.
Okay.
That would just, that little one thing would allow that side of the borough.
Okay. Thank you. I'm going to stop you there. Thank you. And Isabel, 30 seconds.
Yeah, I mean, I've said it already. We need to tax the multimillionaires. You know, we need a 2% tax on billionaires. We need a 1% tax on people who have above £10 million. We need to take our money, because it is our money, back off them and then invest it where it needs to be invested. And we need to apply the Equality Act and reduce inequality in every decision that we make, and that does involve reinvesting in where homes are not fit for habitation, where there's no infrastructure, where you don't need to create jobs. You know, I loathe that phrase, creating jobs. There's plenty of work. You know, look around you. There's work to be done everywhere. It just has to be properly organised, properly funded, and the only way to do that is to stop the plunder. To be honest.
Perfect. Thank you. Okay, thank you all for all your contributions and for your time today. I think we're coming towards the end of this session. So I just want to thank you all for your questions that you've put in the chat. We've got a record 45 questions and comments. So unfortunately, we're not going to have time to go through all, but all of the questions will be sent to all the candidates so they can review and respond accordingly. And also the link to the YouTube is going to be on the websites as well, Local Motion and Enfield Climate Action Forum. So we now are in the final stage of this session, and each candidate is going to have approximately half a minute to say why we should vote for you. So hopefully this is your opportunity to free flow and say whatever key things that you think people need to hear to be able to select you on Thursday. And I am going to start with Isabel, since you're here. You're the last, so you can go first.
Yeah, a vote for me is a vote for justice. You're going to get justice with me. We're going to pass the benefits of all of the advances of the past few years back to you, where it should be, rather in the hands of a few greedy people. And we've got lots of ideas, and they're tried and tested. They're ideas that have worked in other places. you know, such as the 4-day week, such as the universal basic income, such as rent controls, such as a wealth tax, insulating homes, getting rid of 0-hour contracts, properly paying disabled people, taking care of people. There's so many policies. I think you really have to have a look at the manifesto, because you really would be surprised.
Okay, thank you very much for that. And Erton, please, why should people vote for you as an independent?
Right, so while I appreciate all of the questions and concerns about local issues, I have to reiterate the fact that the main reason why I'm running as an independent candidate is because I want to end UK complicity in genocide. And I'm disappointed that there was no questions about that today, and because it is something that's affecting all of us. Currently, our tax money is being sent on killing innocent men, women, and children in Gaza, right? And we need to call it what it is. It is a genocide, and unfortunately, I'm very disappointed that Ferial Clark, who's been MP for the past 4 or 5 years, abstained on November 15th.
Can you say why we should vote for you, please? Let's stick to that.
So,
you've got 5 seconds.
A vote for me is a vote for humanity. We can't allow genocide to become a normal thing in this world. We can't belittle the verdicts and rulings of the international criminal courts and the International Court of Justice. What's happening in Gaza today can very easily happen here tomorrow. So we need to stop this now. End the bloodshed.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay. If I can ask Stephen, please.
Okay. I think on a national point of view, raising the 20k tax limit, I think that's going to be such a game changer for everyone, workers, pensioners, you name it. From a local point of view, as we've said, like no build on the green belt. I think touch on fly tipping, that's something I'd like to talk about. But one of the things that I would really like to see in Enfield, which may surprise you, but I've got an electric vehicle because I do believe in the environment. The charging infrastructure in Enfield is useless. It's abysmal. And I would push to make it the best charging infrastructure in the whole of London, which means that we could get more electric cars on the road in Enfield, which would benefit everyone.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And Guy?
Yeah, hi, absolutely. Let me speak directly to you now, those of you watching. On Thursday, you've got a choice. More of this kind of boring two-party politics that we've got used to that's ultimately not delivered for our country. More of the same, with either a Conservative MP or a Labour MP, frankly, or you can have something new, something different, a vision for the future with the Liberal Democrats. We're local champions. It's what we're known for. It's what we do best. I grew up in this area, born and raised in this area, worked in this area, and know Enfield North like the back of my hand. Please, 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 do not vote for the politics of the old. Vote for the politics of the future. Vote to get a fair deal for Britain. Vote for me, Guy Russo, Liberal Democrat in Enfield North on Thursday, July the 4th.
Thank you. Very succinct. Thank you. And Chris?
Thanks. Look, I think, we've talked about this. It's been tough through COVID and the war in Ukraine. The plan is working. Stick with us as a party and you'll continue to be better off under the Conservatives. But why vote for me as your MP? Because I'm born and bred here. I grew up here like others. I care passionately about Enfield. So much so that I got myself elected onto the council in 2018 and I voted against the incinerator. I voted against taking away your weekly bin collections. I voted against the local plan to destroy our green belt. And if I'm your MP, I will champion all those things. I will make sure your voice is heard in Parliament. Look at what Labour have done to our borough. Look at the mess it's in. They can't even manage the street scene. Do you really think you can trust them to run the country?
Thank you.
Conservatives.
Thank you very much. And finally, the last words to Ferial.
Thank you. Just say change will only happen if you vote for it. And it isn't just a slogan. It is an inescapable irony of political fact. So ignore the polls. Think about whether you want 5 more years of the Tories, a future where nothing changes and everything is broken, or change and the chance to rebuild Enfield and the country with Labour. That's the choice at this election on Thursday. And the saving grace is that it is you, the voter, who gets to decide the future. So vote for me and I will continue to fight for Enfield North, regardless of who is running the country.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you all very much. We're at the end now, and I think you will agree with me that today's session has been very informative and it's been great to hear from all the candidates. and time well spent. So I hope it's given everybody food for thought about what to expect from each candidate if elected. And I'd like to thank all the candidates for their contributions and taking the time to join and share their policies and their ideas. And thanks again to the organisers, Local Motion, NCAF, and our media partner, Enfield Despatch. And on that note, I wish you all good luck on Thursday and have a good evening and a good week to everybody.